This is a presentation of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the Mid-Missouri chapter. And our organization is a chapter of the oldest women's peace organization on the planet. We celebrate 100 years in April of 2015. So we're very proud of that. This is the second year that we've done a series on socially responsible investing. And it's maybe an unfamiliar idea for people, but the idea is that we can take charge of money that we have invested or that our churches have invested, our schools have invested, ever so many places hold investments, and we can take charge of those and make sure that money is working for the things that we really care about. So the way that this series has gone, the first week was Sandra Shotwell from St. Louis, and she talked about just the basics of investing. What's a stock, what's a bond, what's a mutual fund, that kind of thing. What are exchange-traded funds? And so she really gave us a general overview of what was going on in her world, the stockbroker's world. Last week we had Neil Carr, who is from Columbia, and when we did this series last year, one of our big goals was to have a broker from Columbia who would get interested and really start to devote his career to socially responsible investing, and Neil has done that. So we were very proud to have Neil with us, and he talked about things like screening, making sure that you knew that your will was being expressed in the things that you were investing in. So he talked about negative screens, positive screens. Just a quick example, if you are very interested in alternative energy, you might not want to have investments in fossil fuels. So that kind of screening is what Neil was talking about. So today we are really excited because we have our friend Sister Barbara Jennings, who was with us last year and talked about shareholder engagement. The idea that shareholders can actually talk to the companies that they hold shares in. Barbara is the director of the Midwest Coalition for Responsible Investment in St. Louis, and she's a board member of the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility in New York City. And she's been involved in social justice lobbying since the 1980s and in the Midwest Coalition since 2007. So her work includes researching environmental and social practices of corporations, dialoguing, and shareholder resolutions. And she works with a lot of the corporations that we know the names of here in the Midwest and in St. Louis. So thank you so much for being here. It's really, really an honor to have you here, Barbara.
Thank you, Margot. It's great to be here again, and thanks to everybody for coming out on a, I guess this is a Tuesday night. Thank you. I'm going to start with a quote from Louis Brandeis, who some will recognize as a great Jewish investor and scholar. "There is no such thing to my mind as an innocent stockholder. He may be innocent in fact, but socially he cannot be held innocent. He accepts the benefits of the system. It is his business and his obligation to see that those who represent him carry out a policy which is consistent with the public welfare." So this was written around 1893. And as we know, Louis Brandeis was also a Supreme Court Justice, a great leader in our country's history. So for us with the Midwest Coalition, we are a faith-based group. We have Catholic members, mostly of religious communities, who began this whole movement back in the 1970s. This started in St. Louis. It also simultaneously started in New York City, with the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility. And that's something that you can write down at home, is www.iccr.org. Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility. It is mostly Christian groups, pension funds for various churches, their endowment funds. There are Jewish groups, and now we have just had a Muslim group joining us, a Muslim investment company. So we're very happy that we're becoming more interfaith in New York City. And I'm hoping, I wish we could have more of that in our St. Louis area too. So for us, as the movement started with the issue of apartheid in South Africa back in the 1970s, and some of us here at this table will remember some of that was going on in the late 70s. I remember boycotting Shell gasoline stations. You drove by the Shell station and you went to Conoco or Amoco or whatever it was. Coca-Cola. None of my friends bought Coca-Cola. Those corporations were very heavily invested, had factories in South Africa, and were buying into the apartheid system. So shareholders in those companies were, especially with the religious denominations, were saying, you know, we got to get into this dialogue with these corporations. Number one, it's an ethical issue, it's a human issue, it's a religious, a moral issue. Number two, for the sake of the corporation itself, they are not going to be able to continue to act in those companies. They will have uprisings, they will be part of, you know, the social unrest, the environmental unrest. And so for those two reasons, both the moral and the practical, the shareholders at that time sat down with Shell, Ford, Coke, Polaroid, HP was one of the big companies. Merkeys? Barclays. So they began to have dialogues with those companies about this from a shareholder perspective. And as you know, during that time also there were the boycotts, there were the protests going on all over the world in front of every South African embassy, pretty much all over the world. So you had those three, the perfect storm, at that time. During the 80s, the 90s, that issue of diversity, racial diversity on boards became more of an issue for shareholders. It sort of evolved into that. Shareholders began asking companies, how are they fostering racial diversity, gender diversity in their executive team or on their boards. So those were some of the dialogues in that time. Other causes that have arisen through the 80s and 90s were the screens for military sales. Margot mentioned the negative screens. So most of the religious denominations began to screen out any corporation that was a major manufacturer or seller of military items, which we still in St. Louis have done that also. We don't buy any company that has guns or that has more than 50% of their product in military sales. Another issue that we've worked on in St. Louis is the nuclear issue. Of course, nuclear bombs, which really won't be too good for any of us. Genetically modified organisms, wages, the wage gap, which is now arising again in awareness in this country. I think it kind of went underground for a while, but it's back. And generally human rights, especially human rights about land, water, and that kind of thing. The 2000s were more global today, definitely more global, and we're more environmental. So most of the members of ICCR have really gravitated toward the environmental climate change issue because this is going to affect all of us, rich or poor, black or white, wherever we live, even in the Missouri where we supposedly have plenty of water, we ought to be concerned about climate change and water scarcity for many, many reasons. This has been one of our direct dialogues with some of the corporations right in St. Louis area that we work with. There's a lot of denial among and comfort in our corporations in St. Louis. Plenty of water. We got the Mississippi, we got the Illinois, we got the Missouri. What's the problem? Well, the problem is climate change and the fact that all of our electricity, our 82% of it in the St. Louis area, and probably here too, relies on water from the Missouri River, and agriculture relies on water. So if we have a drought worse than 2012, we could be in real trouble here in this area. In 2012, the Ameren plant in Illinois, on the Illinois River, almost had to shut down because of lack of water in the Illinois River. So for us in the Midwest Coalition, we have in the last 5 years, along with many members of ICCR, have said, let's get into this water issue. Number one, water is a religious symbol. I mean, all major religions honor, water as a sacrament. They might call it a sacrament or something that's very endemic to their religious beliefs. We all, practice some sort of a washing, rituals, baptisms, tasting water is, any religion you can think of values the creation of water and the fact that it's necessary for human life. So that was the faith-based connection to water. The second is that it's a practical approach with a corporation because they realize that water is material to their being, their very being. Most companies, cannot even get along without water. Even if it's at their drinking fountain, you need water for mining, you need water for agriculture, for utilities. What will we do without our computers, with our electricity? We're sunk.